They put on the badge before sunrise. They carry what nobody sees. The faces of the ones still missing, the ones they found on their knees. They walked into the training knowing this work would change who they are. But they raised their hand and they meant it, every single scar. They are not headlines, they are not glory, they are the unnamed chapter, somebody else's story. But they show up, they show up every single time. They are sworn to find you through the darkness when hope runs out, trained to see what others miss, trained to pull the lost ones out. They will not clock out on you, they will not turn away. Men and women who made a promise and they keep it every day, sworn to find you, sworn to find you. They are sworn to find you. She sat through every training on the signs nobody taught her before. How to read a room in 3 seconds, how to see what hides behind the door. He learned how groomers talk, how traffickers move in plain sight, how to build a case from nothing in the middle of the night. They are not headlines, they are not glory, they are the unnamed chapter of somebody else's story. But they show up, they show up every single time. They are sworn to find you through the darkness when hope runs out, trained to see what others miss, trained to pull the lost ones out. They will not clock out on you, they will not turn away. Men and women who made a promise and they keep it every day, sworn to find you, sworn to find you. They are sworn to find you. Most of them will never see the headlines, most of them will never hear their name. They sit with broken people in the darkness and they carry a grief with no name. It was a promise to the ones not yet discovered, it was a promise made before they knew your face. They were already moving through the darkness, they were already fighting for your case. Hold on, hold on, they are coming. Hold on. So if you are out there tonight in a place you did not choose, there is someone with a badge and a mission, and that mission is you. They have trained for this moment, they have fought for this moment. They are moving right now through the dark, sworn to find you, still looking, sworn to find you, still coming through every door, through every silence, through every lie they were told. They are coming, they are coming, sworn to find you, sworn to find you. Sworn to find you.
Live on the air, Trial Junkies United presents Justice After Dark with your host, Z.
Hey, all the trial junkies, truth seekers, and justice warriors. I'm so glad you joined us tonight. I'm Z, your storyteller in the wilderness of injustice, with my ride or die doc, riding shotgun as we navigate the darkness where the predators hunt, and they're a hunting. And tonight we're going to talk about a crime that's happening right now, not somewhere far away, not in another country, right here, in your city, could be your neighborhood, possibly on your street. This isn't easy content, guys, but it's necessary. And we're going to talk about trafficking. We have to look at it. And it doesn't always start with that stranger in a van. It starts with text messages. It could be a job listing, a boyfriend, foster homes, lots of places. But what we're doing tonight is we're joined by two law enforcement officers, and I'd like to introduce them. First, we have Mike Jackson. Hi, Mike.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And we also have Brad Payton. Brad, how are you?
Doing good, Dave.
So, Brad, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background for our audience so that they can know how many years you were in law enforcement, what you did?
Yes, ma'am. I started my law enforcement career pretty early. I started off even before that as a firefighter at the ripe old age of 17. And I got into the Texas correctional system where I eventually ended up in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And then I eventually got into the Department of Homeland Security where I worked for the Air Marshal program up until just about a couple of months ago. I just recently retired. So I ended my career with almost 30 years of law enforcement, all said and told.
Awesome. Wow. And Mike, what was your law enforcement career?
Pretty much, it's pretty similar to Brad's. I was a paramedic firefighter back in the day, got tired of not being able to shoot back, so I joined law enforcement. And I was a cop in Baton Rouge for about 12 years. And when 9/11 happened, that's when Brad and I came over I came over to Houston and joined the Department of Homeland Security. And during that tenure, though, I taught at LSU as an instructor there in DHS when they were initially formed. They didn't have a training curriculum, so they came to those of us that had training backgrounds. And throughout my 22 years with DHS, I spent about a decade at that time running the training division for the Houston field office. So we're training federal, state, local agencies, firearms training, CQB, situational awareness, active threat response, all of those things. When I retired about a year and a half ago, I basically just took all those training decks and created my own company. DHS wouldn't allow us to go out into the private sector or the private world and teach at places of worship or schools or private corporations, things like that. Now we can. And we can specifically tailor that training. Human trafficking came into play with us years ago. The training curriculum that was put out was an online animated, non-updated program. And Brad and I created just a new one after we got hooked in with the Houston Human Trafficking Task Force. It's actually called HATRA, the Houston Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance. And that basically is a networking group of law enforcement in the entire Southern District of Texas. And so it's a large networking group, and we learned a lot about what was really happening with human trafficking. We got involved in assisting in a lot of cases there. So we basically just put a new program together for our people, and we pushed that out. And so now I'm still using that same training deck with my company, and that's what we're doing. So we do a lot of guest speaks for nonprofit organizations and non-governmental organizations. Typically they'll have us on if they're doing an annual fundraiser or things like that, and they'll have us come and be the keynote speakers there. So it's just kind of a passion of ours because it needs to be done. It needs to be talked about. Education needs to be happening. And to be honest, it's just not happening the way that it needs to be. So
right.
Agreed.
Well, let's see. Therapist, thanks you both for your service. Simi gave you a shout out because she's from Louisiana. She's a Louisiana girl. And of course, then therapist, had to give you a shout out because she's a Texan girl and so sleuthy, Stormy.
Nice.
So they're giving you some shouts out here. But one thing, you both are certified training now in human trafficking recognition. So you started your own business,
Mhm.
and that is Elite.
Elite Edge Training and
Edge,
Consulting.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so that way you can go and you can help people while Brad is working for CASA, which is the court appointed special advocate. And you guys are fighting every day for the children who need a voice, which I'm sure a lot of them come across who have been trafficked or preyed upon, unfortunately. Let's see here. And so,
Therapist, has had a good question, in the view of your talking about identifying from witnesses. She asked, when you're analyzing a witness or a suspect, is there one tell that amateurs get wrong but professionals are trained to spot?
When we're doing an
When you're
interrogation
doing an
or an interview.
interrogation or an interview with a witness or a suspect.
Mhm. Yeah, there definitely needs to have some training in that, because especially with the witnesses, that a lot of the statistics, and I'm not big on statistics, especially with human trafficking, because we don't know about the majority of cases that are out there. We can tell you that there's millions of people being trafficked every day, but those are only the cases that we know about. And the reason we don't know about them is the victims are trained to hate law enforcement. They're trained
right.
how to make up a cover story to where if they do get contacted by law enforcement or any advocate of the judicial system, they're basically forced or coerced on how to stay away from that. So the way that you approach a victim and talk to a victim, you absolutely need to have a little background on it, a little situational awareness, be able to understand from interviewing techniques, what is the right question to ask? What are the right things to say? How do you approach a victim like that? The majority of the victims that we've run into, they don't want to talk to law enforcement for fear
Right.
of what they've been told by their handlers. When you're talking to or interrogating a suspect, you've really got to have a decent law enforcement and investigative background to conduct that interview, because not only can you make that interview get thrown out of court, bringing that information that you obtained that can help jam you up during your adjudication of that entire case. So yes, it's very important for you to have specific training on how to deal with those type of victims and how to deal with those type of bad guys or bad girls, because it's the human traffickers that are out there nowadays are not just guys. There's women
Exactly.
too. Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Brad, a question for you, especially with the children when you're trying to elicit information. Is it easier to get them to talk about perhaps others that were preyed upon than it is for them to talk about themselves? I had read that somewhere, that sometimes they're more willing to talk about their friend being harmed instead of talking about themselves. Is that something you have seen?
So yeah, when we do interviews with children, it's sort of a psychological analysis of the trauma that they go through. And so they will disassociate themselves with their past sometimes, and you will hear them refer to it in a different manner. And kind of like what Mike was saying, you have to have that intelligent ear that comes from training and experience that lead you to believe that what they're saying really is about them. And then sometimes that trained ear does, you pick up on the fact that, no, it's not them, it is somebody else. But from that training and experience, you realize that these children through this interview went through this trauma, and you are picking apart the body language, and depending on how young the child is, sometimes it's the the wrong nomenclature for an adult to a child. We did an interview, not too long ago, over a group of children that were involved. This was just a particular case for child abuse, but we interviewed children from the ages of 2 to 14, and each one representing the exact same trauma, verbalized it in various ways. So you had kids that referred to it in almost unrealistic or in a manner that they weren't present. In other words, they had disassociated themselves, where the older children knew the trauma, recognized the trauma, but they just wanted it done and over with. So, yeah, sometimes it's hard and difficult to think through this. But with the right individual, the right investigator, the right interviewer, and the right technique, you can muscle your way through it. And it takes a little while, but it's pretty traumatic for the interviewee as well, or the interviewer.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and I think that's something that people don't understand is with the line of work that you guys do and have worked in, is there is a lot of people that there's a lot of burnout because it is heavy and it's dark. You have to go to very dark places to find these people. But I think one thing we need to talk about is trafficking and what people think it is, because everybody always thinks, oh, it's the white van and they're kidnapping girls out of parking lots. But what are some of the things that you guys have seen in the trafficking world?
Well, first, put a definition to what trafficking truly is. And when you give this definition, it's almost so broad, it's hard to recognize until you start breaking it down. But the real definition is anyone who is causing by force, fraud, or coercion to gain a labor or a sex act.
Right.
So by force, by fraud, or coercion. And when you attribute those things to what you're looking at, you can really start to break down those individual cases. And that's when trafficking starts to take on a whole new dynamic, because it's not just, as you said, the Liam Neeson, in the white van. Now I have the nanny that is being forced to work under servitude for little to no wage and in deplorable conditions. And who would have thought in their right mind that you would have a nanny in a wealthy neighborhood that is working in bad conditions with no pay? That's human trafficking. That's hard for some people to believe, but a lot of times that is the case. So putting a definition to it changes people's perspective. And a lot of people have the misconception that traffic and smuggling are the same. And in reality, smuggling has nothing to do with trafficking. Smuggling is just the moving of human bodies from point A to point B. And then the trafficking portion is where you gain the labor or the sex out of that.
Right. That's a good definition, and I think that will help clear it up for a lot of people. Katrina asked, what patterns do you guys see the most that other people seem to be overlooking?
The social media thing is one of the new targets that we're seeing a lot of just in the past 5 to 6 years. All the applications and stuff on all these smart devices, these kids are being groomed and they're being contacted and reached out to on social media. That's one of the new battles, and it's very difficult sometimes for law enforcement to ascertain those kind of things. The traffickers will actually put out advertisements on their Instagram page or on chat or things like that. And sometimes it's very difficult for law enforcement to ascertain warrants to be able to go in and get that type of digital information from those people. And to kind of piggyback on what Brad said about, the forced labor issue, there was a lady that answered an ad online to be a nanny in the Woodlands, Texas. And this happened back in 2019. And we've actually talked to this case several times because she was living in a house 8, 9 $950,000 home in a gated community in the Woodlands, Texas. And she was being forced into servitude, forced into labor. When she got over here, they flew her in on commercial airlines. And when she got over here, they took all of her travel documents away from her, threatened to kill her and or her family. And now she's basically a slave, and that's basically forced labor for human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
The other misnomer that we see a lot of is when you think of human trafficking, a lot of people just think it's young girls having to perform sex, and that's not the case. We've seen men, women, and children. We've seen boys that are involved in those things. We've seen older men that are involved in those things. With the agriculture that we have here in Texas, forced labor is, it's a little bit behind sex trafficking right now, but forced labor is one of our big ones too, just because agriculture, retail, hotels, restaurants, that any industry that you can think about, we've seen forced labor take place in those venues.
And also it can be a situation where once these people are trafficked, then they get put in the position or they're forced to then commit crimes for the traffickers. So then if all of a sudden you're now where they might think they're culpable, they're not going to be willing to out their trafficker because now you've made me part of whatever you've put me in.
Correct.
So
one of the training venues that Brad and I went to was actually, there was a victim that had been rescued years prior, and she was now doing a lot of guest speaks around the country for law enforcement and helping train. So we got to ask one-on-one questions with her, and we learned a lot from her. And, you know, my question to her was, what do we do if one of our federal agents is traveling on the other side of the world and we see this occurring? What do we do? And her number one answer was, you have to have your act together. You have to know exactly what to say, when to say it, and what kind of window. We learned from her that when she was being trafficked from LAX to Louisville, Kentucky once a week, and the majority of the times that she flew out there, she didn't have a handler with her. She was by herself. And because they had forced her and coerced her, she wasn't under the influence of narcotics unless she was at one of her locations. When she traveled, she could not smell like marijuana. She could not smell like alcohol. They wanted them sober so they could answer questions. And they had to have a story. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? And why are you doing that? And that kind of training right there led us into, you know, asking her more in-depth questions about just law enforcement approaching these people. And she said that she's used to making $1,000 a day. So if we picked her up and we got her hooked up with a nonprofit organization and they got her a job at your, you know, local corner store making minimum wage or less, why would she leave what she's doing and go to a lesser situation? We needed to have food, clothing, safety, security. All of those things had to have been taken care of before we even made the approach. And she said that there was about a 10-minute window from the time that she got to the airport until she got on the airplane. She would stop at a Jamba Juice, which has got carbohydrates and electrolytes and all of those good things, sugar and things like that in there. And for about 10 minutes while she was sitting at the gate, that was her window of when she actually thought about getting out of that situation that she was in. And before she knew it, she's getting on the airplane and she's gone. And when she gets to where she's going, they put her on just enough of the drugs or alcohol to keep her mind clouded so she would never think about that.
Okay. And Therapist, you know, has another question for you. She says, trafficking cases often involve a web of intertwined offenses like fraud or extortion. From the federal perspective, is it more effective to lead with trafficking charges or build the case through the whole thing?
Well, when you talk about the intertwined, the first thing that Brad and I will think about in a community you're trying to break into, the Asian community is one of the hardest for law enforcement to break into just because of their norms and their values. They're very loyal, and whether they're being forced or their families being threatened if they're performing, their activities for debt bondage. That's one of the hardest communities that we can try and infiltrate to get into. So yes, there are, in fact, in Houston, we have a large Asian population that is hooked into the West Coast, and they will contact the West Coast and say, we need to ship 6 individuals out to you, ship 6 individuals back to us. And
Right.
so that way they keep the product fresh at each one of those locations, and they kind of go from there. Those are very difficult to get into. But to answer your question about which avenue, it could be a drug-related charge. It could be a traffic stop. It could be anything that we could get our foot in the door to where we can start building an investigation. Typically, human trafficking, unless we have a victim that comes directly to us, that's one of the last things that we'll find out about during doing any investigation.
Right. And debt bondage, Brad, is when someone gets to come over, like if you were talking about the Asian community, they get to come over to the U.S., but then they are so indebted to the people that ship, that helped get them, their traffickers get them here, they'll never get out from underneath it. Isn't
Yeah,
that
it's
correct?
such a trap. Yeah, it's such a trap that we get a lot of those coming from our neighbors on the south side, Mexico, South America, that they're coming over here for what they believe to be, a better life, a better resource for their family back home. And the reality is that it's such a never-ending game. They paid a mule to smuggle them across the border, and then they got over here with the promise of a good-paying job, extensions of the business, for them, things like that. But by the time they see reality, they owe more money, their pay is lower, their hours are longer, and their facilities that they live in or survive in is just deplorable. And they're paying even more money to do all of these things. So it's something they will never catch up on.
Yeah.
And it's something they can never pay their way out of, no matter how much they work, how hard they work. It's the trap that they live in continuously. And that's the traffickers' goal is to keep that mental capacity and that emotional brought down so that they never feel like they could get ahead. They always have to keep working. And it could be where Mike was saying, in threat of the family back home, that they can force them to keep working because their family could be in danger.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me how because the public perception, in general is that, this indebted servitude, that is something that happened back in, the 1800s, where all these people, the immigrants were being shipped in, and they were under that servitude. They don't think to themselves that that's still happening, and it's happening today.
Yeah.
Well, as I was brought up through the correctional system as a very young man, one of the very, very first things that I was ever taught, and was taught to me by an inmate, as odd as that was never accept anything. Never take anything from anybody, never accept anything from anybody. And the reason is you pay back double or triple what you were given. And it's that same game that is played in prison that's played out here in the free world, that when you accept that one gift, no matter how genuine, how sincere the person is giving it to you, that facade, you'll never catch up. You'll never be able to repay that debt.
Right.
So that servitude that you owe back is a trap. And unfortunately, too many people fall victim because of the way of life they feel like is better somewhere else. The grass is greener, and just not.
Yeah.
And here's a question from Semi. She wanted to know, what can a regular citizen do to help? If we think something's off, what should we do?
That's a great question to ask, and we love answering that one because there's no real wrong answers for it. If it looks like it's an emergency situation, just like any other emergency, call 911. have law enforcement come out. That is their job. That's what they get paid to do. Even if it ends up not being anything, it's okay. I'd rather, 9 out of 10 calls end up being nothing, but that one call that actually ends up being something and they save a human trafficking victim and arrest a perpetrator for it, that's worth its weight in gold. Recognizing the signs and symptoms of human trafficking. And those just real quickly are, they're not allowed to speak. If they do speak, it sounds rehearsed, or it sounds like they have made up that answer or whatever that is. They're not in holding of any of their documents. They don't have an ID. If they're traveling, they're not holding their plane tickets, passports, any of those type of documents. Their movement is restricted. And it's not, your typical Hollywood style where they grab, the female, a male victim grabs a male perpetrator, grabs a female victim and basically drags her around by the arm. It doesn't look like that in the real world. Like that case that I just told you about, that where we got to interview and got to learn from that individual. It could be, they could be traveling all by themselves. So those things that you look at, and everybody knows the common signal for help is when only time that you're supposed to put your thumb inside your hand. And you see a lot of reels and a lot of memes that are all over social media nowadays, that are staged, but it's for educational purposes. They're trying to get that information out there. If you think like that case in the Woodlands, a neighbor that was down the street saw this individual that did not look like the rest of the family members, but she only saw her outside in the backyard on a couple of occasions. And her just being a nosy neighbor, she tried to walk over there and speak with her, and the individual ran back into the house. So after a few times of doing this, she contacted law enforcement, and she said, it may be nothing, but it may be something. Can you just go over there and find out what it is? And they went over there, and come to find out, she was being trafficked, and she was being forced into working for that family, sexually abused by the man of the household. So the other thing that you can do is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It's an 800 number, and they have very well-trained professional operators that answer the phone. And you're going to go through the automated textbook, system. Are you being trafficked? Press 1. Do you think you know somebody that's being trafficked? Press 2. Are you law enforcement? And it'll run through all of those things. Once you get a real live human being on the phone, they're very good at what they do. They know what questions to ask. They have local law enforcement resources from anywhere. So Brad and I would train our agents. If you're in Fargo, North Dakota, and you need an asset for human trafficking, law enforcement wise, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They can pull it up in their computer, and they can tell they have an individual that is specifically trained and experienced in human trafficking, and they can put you in touch with that person. So the National Human Trafficking Hotline is huge. Again, if it's something that's emergent, just call 911 and have law enforcement come out there and take a look at it. And it could, it could be absolutely everything. It could be absolutely nothing, but you don't know until, the old DHS adage, when we first started working the counterterrorism operations that we were doing, we were trying to press the public, and it still stands today. If you see something, say something.
Say something.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if something feels off, react to it, and don't expect someone else to do it. Go ahead and do it. Nobody's going to be mad at you if it turns out to be nothing.
Correct.
It's a relief.
Correct.
Let's see. Therapist has another good question here. She says, for those watching at home who want to be more than consumers of the content, what is the single most important indicator you wish the public was trained to recognize in their local communities?
Well, I'd love to narrow it down to one single thing, but it kind of plays a part in who your victim is.
Right.
If I'm talking about children, then which for me, that's more of where I'm at on a daily basis, I guess. I'm looking at children whose behavior becomes modified over a short period of time, or the child is in possession of things that they're not normally in possession of, or monetarily wise, they shouldn't be in possession of. Expensive jewelry, clothes, electronics, things of that nature. You know, what this leads me to believe is there's someone out there grooming them. There's someone out there coaching them and giving them things them up to make them more comfortable with that person and what they can do with them next. So they're leading them to an eventuality where it's an escape, or it's them leaving, and at that point, the child could be taken to a place where it's even harder to get them back, or it makes it much more difficult. And these are not so much the victims of opportunity. These are groomed over weeks, months, maybe years. There are cases where there were victims of opportunity. There was a young girl, this was many years ago, in Mike, what was it, Dallas area?
Mm-hmm.
She was with her family at a sporting event, a large arena. And when the you've heard about that case?
Yeah, we did show about that one time.
Okay, then there was, that young girl was a victim of opportunity. So for that particular one, I would recommend that, you know, you're not alone. That if you're in a big venue like that, safety in numbers,
right?
Making yourself, you know, very well known, that if somebody comes and grabs you, I'm screaming my head off. I'm going to bite, chew, do whatever I got to do to get away. So things of that. Mike, you want to talk a little bit more about the other indicators?
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about that Dallas case. That 13-year-old was taken, again, from an opportunist, but they did have their ducks in a row, and how they trafficked her and how they got her out of there. That's why I mentioned earlier, I'm not really big on statistics because we only know what we actually know. But if you were to pull up any law enforcement statistics on human trafficking, you're going to see that the average age is age 12 to 18 years old, that 60 to 70% are in the welfare system or in the foster system. A large percentage are addicted to drugs and or alcohol. A large percentage come from dysfunctional families. They're disabled. A lot of these statistics are not true at all with that girl that was taken in Dallas. And one of the big teaching points that we used when we were teaching to that case was recognizing that as fast as possible. Law enforcement policy, if you were to call in and say that your child was missing, law enforcement policy is call us back in 24 hours because nobody is technically missing until they've been gone for 24 hours. That happened in Dallas on that case, and the family, thank goodness, went to other non-governmental organizations, and they used a photograph and facial recognition to be able to locate that girl on a social media site being sold for sex. And and I say that because all of those generalizations, and therapists, you're asking, what are we specifically looking for? In law enforcement, they tell us that we can't use that profile word. But I can tell you when we're doing counterterrorism operations, that's exactly what we're doing, is we are profiling the heck out of people because we're trying to establish what that baseline is. What is normal? What is normal in this environment that we're in? What is normal for this state or this city or this whatever event that is that we're in there? And then what doesn't look right? And in law enforcement, we're trained to trust that sixth instinct, that gut instinct that we have. And you don't ever let that gut instinct go away. So, I wish I could tell you that it was just like Hollywood puts out there, this is what happens. But there's just like that case that happened at the Dallas Mavericks basketball game.
Yeah.
We've seen incidents where girls are groomed by an older boyfriend. They're in high school and they have a boyfriend that is college age, and that makes them feel better within their own skin to where they can tell all of their high school friends and look better socially or in their with their peers because they have an older boyfriend. And he is buying her gifts, and he's, like Brad said, grooming them. And then next thing she knows, she's being trafficked against his friends or his colleagues, or he's selling her out for that. So just overall, if I had to answer it with just one question, something's just not right. And you
Okay.
just follow your gut on that, because, and then call somebody that does know about it, and call the National Human Trafficking
Yeah.
Hotline and talk to an agent or somebody about it.
And that
And I
that
think,
information is in the description,
yeah,
guys. So
Doc put
yeah.
it in there for you. But I
Okay.
think another thing is too, with a lot of parents don't realize, is how much trafficking goes on at college itself,
Mhm.
where boys or girls get their significant other and they traffic them. It starts easy. It's, hey, this guy will give us a keg if you'll do this for him.
Right.
We do it all the time. What's the big deal, honey? Or,
Mhm.
or even a girl getting her boyfriend to go do, so I think as parents, just to be aware, have the conversations with
Mhm.
your kids that this is trafficking isn't the white van. It can be. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but normally that's not how it is. It's a slow grooming process. It's, yes, people get taken, but not as much as they get groomed.
Right. And like Brad said earlier, if you're looking at changes in somebody's behavior, if your child is typically a straight A student and now they're not, if they're typically very well groomed and now they're not, anything that takes you off of that baseline is what you're looking for. If they were I know when my daughter turned 13, I thought I could swear I saw horns coming out of the back of her head because she was turning 13. But those kind of differences just in attitude and in behavior and anything, anything that is just outside the norm. As far as education, that's one of the biggest things that everybody needs. Did you put the DHS Blue campaign
Yes.
link on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That website there, if you go to Homeland Security's Blue campaign, go to the resources tab and then click on training. There are a lot of good training blocks that are on there that are good for ages 5 up until 24 years old. They're interactive trainings, and kids, along with their iPhones and their iPads and all of those things, can actually get on there, and before they know it, they're actually being taught how to not become a victim, how to recognize, what a victim looks like and things like that. And that's all
Right.
free training that Homeland Security puts out.
And I
Right.
think it's worth noting as well that in some cases, you have victims that are not even aware that they are victims
Right.
because they have either been in a lifestyle like this before, or they're being brought over where their situation may have been worse. And it's hard for them to envision the fact that they're a victim of human trafficking when they're making a wage that for them it may be okay.
Right.
In so many situations in a rural area, I'm from Liberty County, and so we are a predominantly rural area where we've got farm workers. And some of these farm workers come over here, and we have, they are in very desolate areas, and the living conditions are very poor, but it's not as bad as where they were, or at least in their mind, they're doing it to help their family, protect their family. So you're talking with them and convincing them, the law, what the law says, and looking at the situation, they are a victim, but they don't even realize that they are a victim. You have to sort of break this down, and sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's language barrier, but making them aware that they are that victim. You may recognize it, but they don't even know it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And let's see, Katrina wanted to know what's the most common recruitment method that you guys have seen in your experience. And she doesn't single what exactly.
Unfortunately, the largest number still today is family members.
Yeah.
The next one is an intimate partner, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, and then online recruitment. But the family members actually selling their kids, selling family members or whatever for whatever reason, if it's to pay for their drug addiction, if it's to pay their rent or water bill. We've seen cases before where children have been bred for sex trafficking, and all they know is, or all they think is, that's their boyfriend that's coming over to see them today. Because if you look at human trafficking, especially sex trafficking, you compare that to drug usage. A drug dealer can take one drug and sell it to one end user. They take that drug and then that drug is gone. With a
Right.
human trafficking victim, you can reuse that victim 8,
Over and
10,
over.
12 times a day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's why that the trafficking statistics are coming up there. They're one of the biggest international crimes that we have, second only to the drug trade. And because you're looking at over 150 some odd $billion per year that is played into the human trafficking thing. So,
Yeah.
it's sad to say that family members would do that, but we see that. But
Yeah.
again, the online recruitment and the online grooming, with the social media apps and all of those things, that's high on the rise right now.
And therapist had another question. She said, in your experience, how much does the CSI Effect, the TV show, jurors expecting that high-tech forensic evidence in every case actually impact how you prepare a case for trial today versus earlier in your careers?
There's a lot more technology that's good and that's bad. Back when I started in law enforcement, DNA was a very new thing, and that was something that it would, like we had discussed earlier, that our typical crimes do not get solved in 60 minutes or less. Just like the
Right.
TV shows are. Hollywood is going to Hollywoodize it, just because that kind of blood and gore and those kind of things sell. But the greater the technology, there's pros and cons to each one of those things. It allows us to do more things on an investigative basis, like DNA, or, with the artificial intelligence out there, we can help recreate trajectories of, certain investigations and how they're played out. So I think it takes a higher education level for the investigators that are performing that work. On the forensic side of it, I know our crime scene detectives, when I was with the sheriff's office in Baton Rouge, they were going to school for a very long time before they could come back. And it was amazing what some of the crime scene detectives can do. I never was a crime scene detective, but I did work homicide, armed robbery for my last 6 years there. And I learned a lot just by watching them and seeing how they collected certain things of evidence, whether it was blood spatter or hair fibers or clothing fibers or, skin or whatever the case was. So, I think that we've come a long way in law enforcement when it comes to the forensic aspect of it. But that also requires a lot of training and a lot of knowledge to be able to do that. One, to be able to recognize it or look for it. And then two, what do you do with it once you have it? And then how is it processed? And how is that introduced into the adjudication system in court?
Well, and I think too, when you agree that it also depends on where the crime's at, because some of these smaller agencies might not have the money for all the tech that they need on a case.
That's correct.
So if
And
they
especially
don't call,
with human trafficking now,
Yeah.
I got asked to be a board member for the ACT Foundation based out of San Diego. It's Anti-Child Trafficking Foundation. And in our times that we've spent going across the nation trying to do outreach with law enforcement, when we ask law enforcement agencies, what do you need? And they always tell us the same thing. We need resources and we need money.
Yeah.
And Z, let me add to what Mike's saying as well. Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
When you are looking at that evidence, as the person who's reporting being that good witness, please remember that a small detail to you may be something huge to the investigator. Taking good notes, being as aware of what's going on around you when that situation is happening could be the difference in that case. So as the individual is preparing, this is what's happening, I'm taking good notes, I'm making that phone call, those little details could be tremendous to the investigator. So for the listeners out there, please remember, details matter in these cases. No matter how small it is, let the investigator turn it down. Please don't ignore what you think is insignificant.
And
Okay.
when you talk about the smaller agencies that don't have the fundings and the resources that are available to them, they do have resources available to them. So the smaller law enforcement agencies, like here in Texas, they can reach out to DPS, they can reach out to state police, they can reach out to their federal partners, Homeland Security, FBI, all of those agencies on the federal side of the house. You saw the Nancy Guthrie case. There's every agency involved
Yeah.
in that case right there, just as an example of that. So even though they don't have the in-house resources for that, they have avenues of where they can get that.
Yeah. And I think that's important for people to understand. But one thing I wanted to kind of circle back to, because we touched on it briefly, but is the trafficking of men and boys, and specifically sex trafficking,
Mhm.
because so many people don't want to think that that can happen. And I don't know what we have to do to get people to realize that, yes, it does happen to men and to boys, and we shouldn't put a stigma on it.
And part of the sad response to that fact is that boys and men are being sexually trafficked. And I'll add to that by saying the traffickers can make more money selling a male victim than they can a female victim. And
Yeah,
that's the sad reality in the world that we live in today.
yeah. And I actually learned that from Melissa Yellowbird Chase, an advocate in North Dakota, a native advocate, because when I first started and I said something about the girls, she goes, "What about the boys?" I go, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "They make more money for boys."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, "They do." And so she set me straight so that I would understand that, yeah, this is something that they do. They make more for boys and teens and young men. So, we have, because I watched a recent show, a documentary in New York, where they were talking about the situation where it seems like here were the girls that had been trafficked, the cases that had been taken to court, there were none for the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the prosecutors don't even want to look at those
Mm-hmm.
cases. Like, it's not even going to be, if they can't get a win, we're not even going to do it. So we'll just either ignore it or charge it down.
Mm-hmm.
These are victims.
Yeah.
They
And
need their justice.
yeah, and you see it a lot in schools. The schools don't want the publicity or the negative publicity, so that the teachers are not going to reach out if they see, a child is being groomed, like Brad was discussing earlier. That they're not going to want to do that. They're going to want to sweep that under the rug and keep that quiet. But the fact of the matter is, it happens, and we have not seen a location that has not been affected in the past at some point in time, whether it's a school, a place of worship, a private business, in the home. We've seen it anywhere. It's not just like massage parlors, and it's not just like bars and restaurants and things like that.
Right.
It happens everywhere, and it happens to everybody. And people just have to realize that, Hollywood may put one thing out there, but the reality of the matter is that it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's important that we have to talk about it. I think there are more men that are coming forward that are now coming onto YouTube and speaking about it, so that it isn't like some taboo thing. No, it's a crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's just basically a crime against another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we have to realize it. And we have to be there for them, just like we are for the women and the girls. Let's see. Katrina asked, what policies and protocols look good on paper, but fall in practice, in your opinion?
Wait, you cut out there for a second. Say that second
Okay.
part again.
She says, what policies or protocols look really good on paper, but realistically they fail in practice, in your opinion?
Well, like I said a minute ago about the statistics, If you were to go to any agency and review their statistics of what they place a human trafficking victim to look like, and you compare that to the Dallas case, that's absolutely wrong. An individual that's been missing is not considered missing by any law enforcement agency until they've been gone for more than 24 hours. And that case right there proved in and of itself that that's not necessarily the case. So you may have to force law enforcement to do more, or hope that you get a law enforcement agent that is willing to go that extra mile. That's probably one of the biggest failures that I've seen in it. But I do understand why law enforcement agencies have those policies, is because you have runaways and teenagers that don't like their mom and dad telling them no, and they're used to now being entitled and getting everything that they want. And so they just run away from home for a night and go spend the night with a friend. And so law enforcement would be so tied up on working those type in cases. And that's why they created those kind of policies. Anything else that we can see policy wise, as far as human trafficking is affected, it's just the investigation part of it. It's just getting to the point to where we recognize, or we get the information that we need to actually start investigating that type of crime.
And I'll tell you right now, the term runaway is one of my pet peeves, because anytime a teen or a young person leaves, they want to immediately run away. And it not necessarily is, you know. It can be a child that's been coerced out through social media, and then they get into a situation they can't come home, and they get trafficked because they thought they were safe. You know, I'm just going to, because sadly, these young people think that the people on the internet are their friends. I've been talking to this person forever. This is my friend. It's not a stranger. No, it's a stranger. You haven't met in person. You don't know these people.
Ultimately,
You know.
it's education of the of even children. You know, what to look. You know, to be aware of what to look for in a trafficking situation. I mean, it like you were saying earlier. You know, some people don't even realize that they're being trafficked. You know, but if the young ones need to be educated enough to tell whether or not this person can I listen to them? Yeah, you know, kind of like, does it have the ring of truth? You know,
Yeah.
that type of deal. I think the children need to be educated, and they're just not being educated on you know, what's proper and what's not proper on social media.
Well, kind of going back to your question on policy, sometimes it's as what me and Mike have been trying to do with a lot, is education of law enforcement entities themselves. I've run across entities, departments local to here, that will tell you trafficking does not exist in my county or in my city. That's a big city problem. That doesn't happen here. And so many times we have run across, as you said, a home with 30 people that was in a suburban neighborhood, that the only thing that really made it stand out was the number of vehicle traffic. The vehicles that were pouring through this little neighborhood that was, you know, just a perfect little Susie Q place. But when you talk to law enforcement, human trafficking doesn't happen here. So educating those individuals that this is something happening in your neighborhood. In fact, it's across the street from you right now.
Yes.
Yeah, we've seen cases where law enforcement will go in and do a raid relative to a sex trafficking case and end up taking the victims to jail for prostitution. And so those kind of cases right there, that's one of mine and Brad's biggest pet peeves is It's not that hard to learn your
Yeah.
job. It's not that hard to do your job properly. But if you don't have the law enforcement agency that's got the necessary knowledge, if you don't have the prosecuting district attorney that has the knowledge, and if you don't have it's the entire judicial system when it comes to that everybody needs the education on it, and that includes law enforcement.
Yeah. And a therapist made a comment here, and I kind of agree with her. She says if an LE assumes every death is a murder until it's ruled out, then why can't we look at every missing child as much more than just tagging that runaway title? Because I think it just gives some of them the chance to say, oh, they're a runaway. And
Mhm.
if they are a continuous runaway, my question would be, why?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know?
What's going on that they are doing that?
Correct. And she's right in that any death investigation that law enforcement does, every death is looked at as a homicide until it's proven not to be. And the reason for that is we don't want to miss anything in that investigation. It may look one way, and we always have this 5% margin for error that we have no earthly idea what we're looking at. I rolled up on a case back in the 90s where it was a shooting that had occurred. And I drove up, and there's one guy laying on the ground with bullet holes in him, and the other guy standing above him with a gun in his hand. Reason would tell you that the guy that's standing just shot the guy that's on the ground, and that's not at all what happened in that case. So
Wow.
for law enforcement to be able to look at every runaway or every missing person as a human trafficking victim, the only reason I could see that they would not is just resources and money,
Yeah.
funding, having the time, having the agencies to do it. I taught a class for active threat response for a company up in Boston a couple of months ago. And the agency that responds to that area, I actually had this police department show up over there. Their jurisdiction, and of course, they do things a little bit different up in the Northeast than we do here in Texas. Their jurisdiction was like 4 square miles. And when I was in Baton Rouge working for the sheriff's office, our jurisdiction was 400 square miles. And so they have 3 police officers on duty 24/7. That's not a lot, even for 4 square miles, because if you're looking at, the suburbs of Boston, there's still, several million people that are in that. And with that many people, you're going to have that many crimes. And so those police officers of that small department right there, they probably just don't have the resources or the time.
Well, and that's on the native lands, on the tribal lands, especially like down in New Mexico, where they have over 1 million acres and 7 different regions, and they have 5 officers in those regions, and that's it.
Yeah,
I
response
mean,
time is 45 minutes for, a felony.
well,
That's
and that's if they can even get the call. Some of them don't have 911. Some of them don't have enough cell service.
mhm,
A lot of them don't even have electricity or water.
mhm.
So, these are the things that they're dealing with. Um, I therapists, and my mod follow are like, okay, Mike, we want to know the rest of the story of the guy standing over.
Yeah.
He didn't
You
shoot him. Who shot
he
him?
can't leave us hanging like that.
Yeah, the guy standing over him was actually his cousin, the victim's cousin. And when he ran out there, he heard the gunshots and he came out with his gun because he thought he was going to respond to
Okay.
the shooter. So the shooter was gone. Yeah.
Okay, girls, you can settle down now. But another thing I just wanted to touch on briefly too is, because the LGBTQ community, these teens that sadly sometimes they become homeless because families can't deal with this decision, and they're just prime for traffickers to get a hold of.
Mhm.
You know, how, are you seeing a lot of the transgender community or the gay community that are getting swept up by traffickers?
Not specifically that, but that is a true concern because there are traffickers that will look for children that are in foster care, look for teenagers that are, they have drug problems or alcohol problems or a disability, something that they can use as a wedge to place in between the victim and their families, to get them away from their families, to just simply become a victim. The LGBTQ and all of those individuals, I haven't specifically seen like a transgender that was run out of home, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that if the family was, if they were trying to eject that individual from their household. That's just like I mentioned earlier. That's one of the statistics, if you will. Anybody that comes from a disadvantaged position, the traffickers are going to use whatever weapon they can to get that individual under their wings.
Yeah. And Brad, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I can't remember if it was maybe 2 years ago that they had a situation here in Houston where they thought that some of the people working with the foster children in charge of them were actually trafficking these girls.
Yeah,
and
we just recently had a case that developed out in, I think it was the Huntsville region sector, that we determined that it was a case agent that had been using the children in trafficking, and they were using. It kind of plays into what you were saying, Mike. The anybody, it doesn't matter who they are. When you have an individual that feels vulnerable, that feels neglected, that regresses from society, they are looking for anything in this world that gives them comfort, that makes them feel loved. And the psychology that goes into that is, when I'm the person who's preying on those individuals, I really don't have to look very far. I just have to be patient. And the gay community or the LGBTQ community are so vulnerable. Society does put those people in a different box sometimes, and families can do that as well. And so it makes them vulnerable. Well, I'm not sure how this particular CPS agent got himself or herself involved in where they had turned to the other side. But yes, they had been using these vulnerable children as a mechanism for trafficking outside or within the state of Texas, and it was eventually made aware that this was happening. It was very sad to hear that that these children trusted, that was their one source, could have been their one source that they trusted. They felt safe, and he was grooming them from the get-go.
Yeah, it's almost a conversation for an entirely different show. I mean that.
Yeah.
Because we get so many stories about the corruption ranks in certain law enforcement, and it's appalling when a good law enforcement agent turns bad. And and that unfortunate that happens, but we've done too many stories to say that it's just a coincidence. It doesn't happen, so
we did a case with up on one of the reservations where he was with the BIA, and he was messing with one of the native women, and he was coercing her, and her children were in the home, and she was scared. The only reason it got found out was she got pregnant. And so these are the cases. But the people, when you're a caseworker in charge of children, or you have the homes that children get put in if they're considered having a difficult time, or the Emily Pike case, which was in Arizona. She had been sexually abused by someone in her home, And so they took her out of her home and put her in a home for troubled youth instead of getting rid of the abuser.
The real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
eventually that poor little girl winds up deceased and
Mm-hmm.
mutilated. And it's like, we have to do something, you know. And part of it is telling the story so people are aware, because children need to be protected. Children cannot consent to sex.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the legal age. They're, you know, my feeling is, I think across the entire United States it should be the age of 18, and they should get rid of Romeo and Juliet laws.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. It's like, I think it gets confusing because this state, you know, if she's 14 but you're 17, it's okay. And it's like, no. It's
Or if
not.
there's only a 2-year age difference in between the perpetrator and the victim, then
Yeah.
you know it doesn't constitute a crime.
Yeah.
But I'll just recap, and going back to what you were talking about as far as law enforcement, there is nothing that a good cop hates more than a bad cop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I would put a bad cop in jail faster than you're to make your head spin. There's nothing more frustrating for us, because then that makes it bad and makes it harder on us to be trusted by the public, to be trusted by
Yeah.
victims,
Sure.
to be trusted for, you know, when we're doing an interview, not an interrogation, but we're just doing an interview. We're trying to facilitate facts or intelligence or whatever the case it is, so we can combat any kind of crime. It doesn't just have to be human trafficking. If the community doesn't trust us, then you're spinning
Yeah.
your wheels. And it's
Yeah.
all because of one bad apple. And it typically takes 100 attaboys to correct one bad apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in law enforcement,
Yeah.
that's pretty difficult to do.
Mhm.
And I think anybody in a position of authority, when they go bad, you know, because right now I don't know what's going on, but we're seeing these female school teachers that have all lost their minds. I'm sure they've always been out there, the little
Mhm.
predator, you know, whatever, but they have just literally, it's like you cannot get on X or any of these social medias that they are not arresting some female teacher. And it's,
Mhm.
and I am sick and tired of them treating them special.
Yeah.
If that was a man doing the same thing, they would put him under the jail.
Mhm.
And then for her, they're, oh, well, we'll give her a couple of years, or we'll give her probation.
Mm-mm.
No,
Mm-mm.
you're a predator.
Mhm.
Children cannot consent. No plea deals for predators, for child predators. I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
Mm-mm.
You
Yeah.
prey on the innocent. Mm-mm.
Just had one that made it out into the reals world. The former mayor, female mayor over in Louisiana.
DeRitter?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
That had sex with her son's high school buddy during a party.
And her son saw it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they're
Wow.
trying to, she got sentenced, but she's still out waiting for
Mhm.
coming back in. And
Yeah,
it's
had
like,
that been me, no, I would not be out on my own recognizance. With,
you know
no
what? Her
bond
brother got arrested at the same time, and he's
Mhm.
still in jail for the same thing.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That's
So,
right.
family affair.
Hmm. But you know,
You
when you
know.
talk about education, I know when my son and my daughter were younger, I shielded them. I shielded them from every single thing that Brad and I had been working on for the past 3 or 4 decades, because I didn't want them to know about this kind of stuff. And when I
Right.
would come home from work, I would walk in my front door and it was like a breath of fresh air, and that was a reminder to me. That's why I did the things that I did. That's why I do the things that I do, is right here in front of me. When my kids got to be like ages 10, 11, and 12, I had to stop doing that. And I had to start educating them on what happens in the real world, because things that my kids, when they were 10 or 11 years old, they're in their 20s now. When they were 10 and 11 years old, they were doing things that we didn't do. And when I was that age, until I was 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so times had changed. And so I had to educate them, especially my daughter, very quickly on what to look for, what not to look for, where to be, where not to be. And there was no more sugarcoating it. I still monitored their cell phones. I still monitored their apps. I limited those things as long as I possibly could. And then when they turned 18 years old, it was kind of like, okay, well, you're an adult now, so go see it. But I would still watch the things on their apps. But that was only after I'd spent years of grooming them about what happens in the streets and in our neighborhoods. And there is no place that's immune to it. They graduated from a very large, very popular high school over here. I think there was 1,400 in my son's graduating class and like 1,300 in my daughter's graduating class.
That's huge.
And but yeah, it's that school was not immune to any of these types of events.
Yeah.
And so the education part of it, and that's why I mentioned that the Blue campaign from DHS, that interactive training that they have on that site is very good from ages 5 all the way up till older, and in early 20s. It's good information. If you have a son or a daughter right now, and it needs to be a son and a daughter.
Yes.
It needs to be both, not just one. But get them educated on it. Get on those websites and look at those things and sit down and have long conversations about it. And, we kind of had several rules that if my kids came home from school or church or wherever, and they heard a word or they heard a phrase, and this is when they were much younger, but they had one freebie. They were able to ask me what that word or what that phrase was. And then I told them there's a couple of rules to this. One, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. I'm not going to lie to you about it. I don't care how disgusting or gross or whatever it is. I'm going to tell you the truth about it. And number two, if I tell you I don't ever want to hear those words come out of your mouth, and I do, then there's going to be a price to pay for that. And of course, the kids would, my daughter would be in the shopping cart at the grocery store or whatever, and she'd wait until we would get in the checkout line and then throw something out there at me, the 5 or 6 year old, throwing out there, hey, Dad, what does this mean? And Clerk and everybody else is sitting there, well, Dad, let's hear it. What are you going to do? But education is key. It is absolutely key. And in our world, when we're talking about human trafficking, that includes law enforcement, it includes judges, it includes politicians, it includes our administration. I know the Attorney General's office here in Texas has done a real good job advocating for a lot of the training and stuff that we need. And through, Chong and her movie that she's trying to put out right now.
Every 40 seconds.
Yeah, every 40 seconds. We're trying to get our program and our outreach out there to where the funding from the movie will help pay for Brad and I to go around and do the training for law enforcement, for NGOs, for schools, for
that'd be
anybody
awesome.
and everybody. Yeah.
Therapist had a question at the beginning that I had screenshot. I like this. It says, with the rise of the streaming and the public commentary, have you noticed a change in how witnesses behave? Does the awareness of being live for a massive online audience change the dynamic of their testimony?
You got to think about that one.
Something to think about, isn't it?
I mean, if it's a witness, and I'm trying to just relate it to human trafficking, but I've seen witnesses on the stand where they give a completely different recollection than they gave me out on the scene the day of the incident. Typically, when they get on the stand, that's a case that has been under adjudication or been going through the criminal judicial system for 12, 18, 24 months.
Yeah.
And their recollection of what they said and what they saw out on the scene, there's a lot of times that they have to hand them my investigative report. Well, you told Detective Jackson this, or you told Agent Payton this, and then they actually have to read it to go back to see that. In just the 4 of us or 3 of us that are on the call here or whatever now, and including Doc, if we see an incident that happens and we're standing in the same area. We're outside a store and we see
Right.
a car wreck, or we see a felony or something like that. Each one of us is going to have a different recollection of that.
Oh yeah.
And
True.
so witnesses, it depends upon their situational awareness, what their job description is, what their upbringing, what their muscle memory is. If they're in law enforcement, I can pretty much bank on that they're going to give me a pretty good, story of what happened. If they are, and I'm not knocking, let's just say school teachers or somebody that works at a place of worship, they're not used to doing the things that law enforcement does. They're not used to
Right.
being that aware and paying that good of attention to it. The situational awareness training deck that I have, that's how I initially start off that training. I have one of my guys or one of my girls come in there and whisper something into my ear and then turn around and walk out. And then I ask the audience, describe him or her to me. And you would be surprised just how many different answers you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a training
Well,
for active threat and situational awareness for a private corporation here in Houston, November. It had 300 engineers and PhDs and physicists and highly educated people, but they've never been in a fistic altercation in their life. And so
Yes.
stress hits the body. And as the therapist will know better than I, the body reacts physiologically and psychologically different when stress becomes a factor. And so
Yes.
sometimes it makes it harder for witnesses to recall that. A lot of people, when you say they get onto the stand or they get into the public spotlight, a lot of people are not used to being able to do things like that. And so that may trip them up. That may make them feel uncomfortable to where they misspeak or they misremember or just absolutely, freeze up. So kind of
Yeah.
depends on the actual individual.
Right.
Well, I know myself in that situation. I would give you a great description of their clothing and hair color and that, but I'll tell you, Doc will confirm. I am challenged with measure. I wouldn't know how tall someone is or
Mhm.
what their weight. I would be so off.
She's dimensionally challenged.
I would be so off on those descriptions. It would just be, but I could probably tell you exactly what they were wearing.
Right. Right.
But the other would be like, what? Oh, I don't know. He was tall.
Hey, Brad, we can see you a little better now.
I had to switch rooms real quick.
Here's a question I'd like to ask, because I did mention that burnout does happen to a lot of you agents that work in trafficking.
Mhm.
How do you guys cope with what you've seen? Because you have seen things that
Yeah, and it's not
you know.
not just in human trafficking, it's in law
Yeah.
enforcement in general. There's no way that Brad nor I could have made, over 3 decades doing the kind of work and seeing the kind of things that we've seen. So we do each have our own coping mechanisms. When my kids were at home, it was my kids. For being in the gym, working out is a huge coping mechanism for me. Training, physical training, going out to the range and blowing stuff up, believe it or not, is a
That
fun
sounds like
coping
fun.
mechanism. Mhm, it is. And then
Z
music.
would have a lot of fun doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, music is another big coping mechanism for me as well. I play music. And so there's nothing more rewarding or relaxing that can, take my brain out of that equation. And,
Right.
we typically try and decompress. We're trained, and the therapists know this, we're trained on how to compartmentalize that type of stress and how to deal with it, to where we can, kind of get it out of our system on our way home from work. And every law enforcement agent, every law enforcement officer, they may have similar coping mechanisms. They may have different coping mechanisms. Some guys like to fish, some girls like to cook. It just kind of depends on them, but it's mandatory. And we see it with the new agents that are coming out now, is teaching. And it's harder because the newer agents are a different generation of people. And it's hard when we have to tell them you need to find a coping mechanism so you can deal with stress. And, but yeah, that's Brad, you got one of your coping mechanisms you want to throw out?
For years and years and years, I felt like I was doing everything under the sun just to keep busy, to keep my mind off of what work was throwing at me a lot of times. But it always resorted back to making sure my family, I was involved in my family. So many of the cases that I worked, I would go back and look and see how the family fell apart, or what part of the child interacted with something that was the decline, and I sort of made it a mission of mine to make sure that didn't happen, not only personally but to the people that I cared about. So I felt like I decompressed by education and by keeping my family, as Mike said, sort of in a bubble, so that they didn't fall victim to these things at times, all while protecting them, but educating them as well. And yeah, I exercise, and I like to spend time in the woods and just get away from people, period, and just sort of decompress and just sort of hit the reset button, Control Alt Delete, and start over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think it's important for everybody to realize what you guys do go through, because you guys are handling things that we can't comprehend. You're seeing the worst of the worst at the worst time, throughout your careers as EMS, as a firefighter, and then in law enforcement as a guard. You've seen this. So I think it's important, because I think it helps people be a little more respectful of the good agents out there, and realize that they've seen stuff we'll never comprehend. So we need to support them in their work when we can, and bring something positive to the table, instead of, because I hate telling story about bad cops, but I don't stay away from it. If there's a bad cop, I'm going to call him out. When there's great cops, I want to put them on and let the public know that we have good officers, agents, that worked for Department of Homeland Security, that you guys cared about your job, you cared about the people, and you do it because you care. And that's what's important. And Pammy said, I am so impressed with these gentlemen. I'm grateful for your service, throwing hugs for the hard times you must endure. And others have said the same thing. And of course, Fala wants me to ask, what are your thoughts on Nancy Guthrie, if you have any that you want to share?
First off, thank you for all of those responses. We do appreciate that. We don't do or have not done the things that we've done in our careers for the glory or for the fame or anything like that. Yeah. We do it because we can and because we want to. And there has to be a willingness and the ability to be able to do these kind of things, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is pretty difficult things from time to time. It's not all blood and gore. It's not all death and destruction, but a lot of times it is. So the Nancy Guthrie case, when that case first broke, it immediately threw me for a loop. And I was hoping and praying that law enforcement was just not releasing information. When we did our investigations, especially at Homeland Security, you don't see us on the news. You don't have our cases and stuff on the news. And a case like that's a local case, it just didn't add up. And as time went on, and even as of last week, Brad is one of the instructors with my company, and I have another instructor that's in the Miami division, that he retired from the FBI a couple of years ago. And he was actually on Fox News as a contributor for that case.
Oh, okay.
And he called me beforehand and he said, I'm about to be interviewed by John Scott on Fox News. What do I say? And we started talking about the case, and we were both scratching our heads like it just does not add up. And, I don't, and Tom actually said it during his interview. It's everything's speculation right now, because we're not privy to what law enforcement knows. We're not privy to what the family knows. We're not privy to a lot of that information. And personally, I'm okay with that because I've been on the other end of that, on the law enforcement side of it. And there's a lot of times that we will not release information because it may tip the bad guys off, or it may let them know that we're getting close, or whatever the case is, or it may make them discard evidence or evidentiary items, things that we would need to prosecute them. But this case just doesn't add up. Something stinks about it, and I don't know what it is, but something just stinks about it. The video of the guy going up to the doorbell camera that's just not normal. And
that's odd.
In a kidnapping case, we've had kidnapping cases before, but like law enforcement has said that was being, a contributor to that story. They don't happen like that. And you don't reach out to TMZ, with
that was weird.
With a threatening or, a ransom letter or ransom note or something like that. That's no. So my answer is, I don't know. But it just doesn't sit right.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think something's really crazy off with that case.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, I hope and I feel for the family. That, somehow, some way she shows up and she's okay. And then law enforcement comes out and tells us what happened. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, but right now it just doesn't add up.
Yeah. And all of you guys that are watching tonight, I want you all to please share this stream out, because we want to help use what Brad and Mike have shared with us to help educate people about trafficking and what happens and what we can do as the public. If we see something, we say something. I think that's so important. But one thing I just wanted to ask you before we wind up here is there anything that, if there's anything that you could, give advice for us, what would it be for us to do as the public?
Education.
Anything else that,
Education early and often, whether you're law enforcement, you're civilian, educate yourself and educate your family. Look at the scenarios that are already in practice or in case studies right now, and go one step beyond that. There's an old what if, the saying of what if I'm in a public setting and this happens, what am I going to do? Practice that with your kids, with your family, with your loved ones, and look at scenarios where you're vulnerable and avoid those or change those. Keep yourself from being the victim. Don't allow yourself to be put in a situation where you think later, I should have never done that.
Yeah, I agree. Education is huge. And that's everybody. That could be pressing your political members, your congressmen and women, your state legislatures, those kind of people, to react to these situations that are going on, and to make them create the training, or to hold or facilitate or to mandate the training to take place. And especially in law enforcement, I mean, that's a must. But law enforcement can't be everywhere. There's only a certain number of us compared to, a certain number of, 8 million people running around the planet right now. So that we need witnesses, we need civilians to step in and to speak up and to recognize, like I said before, I don't care if it ends up being nothing. We had one of our agents, for instance, I'll tell you real quick, that was in Phoenix, Arizona at the airport. And they called me because they knew I was hooked in with the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Houston. And they said, this is what we're seeing. This guy is grabbing this girl's arm. He's leading her around. It looks like he's, whispering mean things into her ear. It was like your Hollywood picture perfect. If I was going to do an online training program for my agents, I would present this to them and say, this is human trafficking right here. And the way that, and they took videos and they sent me still photos and a video of it. And I saw the interaction and I was like, hang up and call 911, get Phoenix PD over there. Come to find out, the guy had just had a brain injury, and Doc, you'll know about this, had just had a brain injury, and she was escorting him because he was in and out of being able to see, and his vision was obscured and he was having real difficulties. But they took it and they investigated it even further. They called the family back in Houston, because they were traveling on the same flight coming back to Houston, and verified their story. Yes, the guy had just had a brain injury, and yes, this is going on. But it's okay. It's perfectly okay to, if you see something, say something. And if it ends up not being anything, you can do it anonymously. You can do it online. You can go through the National Human Trafficking Hotline and say 123 Easy Street in Houston, Texas. It appears that there's something fishy going on. I don't know if it's human trafficking or whatever the case is. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is going to take that, contact local law enforcement wherever it is, and contact their person that they have on record, and they're going to say, this is what we got on the hotline. And there were, I think in 2023 were the last numbers that were put out by the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I think there was like either 6,000 or 8,000 cases that came through the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a pretty good bit. So education, not only your family, just for simple protection so they don't become victims, church groups, schools, and press your children's schools to educate the kids and educate the teachers and, educate. I was in Houma, Louisiana a couple of weeks ago teaching active threat response to their school district. And there were bus drivers, cafeteria workers, teachers, administrative people. And they asked me, why do you think you need to have the janitor staff in here? Because we want to educate everybody but the bad guy. So when you look at education and you're looking at outreach, who do we want to get this information to? Everybody but the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, and that's important. I mean, because there's too many cases. Like I said, you go on social media, they've got the janitor that's a predator. They've got the nurse that's the predator in school. Everybody in the school has been a predator. So, I mean, there's not one job that's missed. So it's like, everybody needs to be educated so that everybody can keep an eye out, and that's what's so important. Semi says, hey, that's the town next door. I'm in Thibodaux. I love Thibodaux, Louisiana.
Nice.
Love it. Doc and I lived in Baton Rouge for 8 years. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
And my husband knows how to cook mean red beans and rice. The man can cook.
Nice.
But one thing, quickly, I want to, let me get some pictures. There was the phone numbers. These are the numbers, you guys. 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text 233-733. Now, please write those down. Those are for the National Human Trafficking. On the slide, I also listed Canada's number, but it's too small for me to read. But they will be in the description. Keep those numbers because it's important.
And you don't have to give your name and information. You can remain anonymous if you don't feel comfortable with giving out your information.
Yeah.
But having a name and number for somebody in law enforcement to be able to reach out to you and ask you, hey, I'm not going to bring you into this, but can you tell me exactly what you saw and what you heard or whatever the case is. So that would just help law enforcement.
We're all part of the human family. We need to look out for each other, people. It doesn't matter anything about the other person. If you see something that feels odd, please call those numbers or call 911, your local law enforcement. Ask them to come do a welfare check, something, because when the hair in the back of your neck kind of goes up, something's funky. Follow through.
If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably not a dog.
Yeah.
But now I want to thank you guys so much. This has been a privilege. You're welcome anytime. If there's ever a subject you want to discuss or a case that you want some attention on,
Mhm.
please, we're here for you. We're a platform. If you have any other people you work with that would like to come on and talk about different topics, we would be privileged. We hope it was a good experience for you guys tonight.
Absolutely.
Uh,
We appreciate you having us on.
Yeah.
And it's something that is near and dear to
Yep,
our heart. And Brad and I may know a few people that would be good to have on your show.
oh, that would
Excellent.
be
That would be
awesome.
excellent.
Mhm.
At the end of the show, like I said, I think there's a song you'll like. You're into music, Mike. I think you'll like this one. I hope. But real quickly, you can choose to stay on if you want. Just as I'm rounding up, we always do a few missing people's posters, and I do MMIP posters because they're the ones that do not get the attention.
Sure.
And so, everyone, you have to stay alert. Put the cell phones down when you're out and about. Look at people's faces. Someone can leave their home voluntarily and then they get in a dangerous situation because they could have been coerced out. Or we know trafficking's real. So please, if you see something, say something. And our first person here is Camara Freiberg King. She's 17, you guys. And they actually, in the state of Washington, did the missing Indigenous person alert. And we know how rare that is. She went missing on April 10th near the city of Chehalis, Washington. She was last seen about 10 p.m. Friday on the road known as Pasco Avenue in the Napeville area of Lewis County. It's a mile north of the U.S. Highway 12. She's 5'2", 125 pounds, brown hair and eyes. She wears glasses. She was wearing a black hoodie sweatshirt, gray sweatpants with white shoes, black North Face backpack. Contact Lewis County Sheriff's Office 360-748-9286. The case number is 26C as in cat 4415. Let's get her found, guys. Next, we have Marcus McIntyre. He is only 14. He went missing on April 2nd from Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. He is got brown hair, long, brown eyes, 5'5". Last seen wearing a red hoodie, red sweatpants, red shoes, light blue Chicago Bulls hat. The police believe he may be in Murray Avenue area. Contact Fredericton Police Force at 506-460-2300 Crime Stoppers or 1-800-222-8477. The file number is 26-7340. Let's get that little guy home. And last, we have April or Sonia Owens. She's 15. She's been missing since April 9th from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. She's missing from the area of Main Street and Stratbrook Avenue, height 5'4", weight 100 pounds. Black hair, brown eyes. Winnipeg Police Missing Persons is 204-986-62450. Reference number is R as in Robert 26-5077. Or their Crime Stoppers is 204-786-8477. Or you can contact the Bear Clan Patrol Missing Persons at 204-794-3568 or Morgan's Warriors Search Team at 431-996-3966. Remember, if you guys have a missing person that you want us to show the poster on one of our nights, get in touch with us. The email is trialjunkiesunited@gmail.com. Tonight was a lot, you guys, but it was also awesome to talk to the professionals who are out there doing the work, helping the people. You came here knowing what's wrong in the world, but you leave tonight knowing what it looks like, where it hides, who they're targeting, and what you can do. You've got some tips, and that's what matters. It's not a small thing. Everything we need is going to be on the screen, so write down the numbers, share them for the National Human Trafficking Hotline, for Canada too. We've also, I've listed some for U.S. citizens in distress in foreign countries. Please, guys, Let's post this. Let's get this show out there so that we can perhaps save somebody else. And I want you to remember that every killer, every predator, every trafficker depends on your silence. Don't give it to them. And it never is a mannequin. So speak up if you see something, guys. You know? And any last words, Mike or Brad, that you want to offer to our audience?
Hey, for all those listening out there, I promise you, your voice matters. So if you, as you've heard already, if you see something, say something. If it turns out it is nothing, it's not a problem. I would rather 1,000 be wrong, but it's the one that's right. That's what's going to matter. So please, if you see something, say something. Let's get your voice out there.
Okay.
Yeah, and Zane's got our information. She knows how to get in touch with us. So if you have something else that comes up, you can reach out through them and ask us any question that you have. We're not immune to, still helping people out. So we live in our communities as well. And so yeah, please do. And thank you very much for having us on. We appreciate it.
All right.
It was a
Yeah,
privilege. It was a total privilege. Doc, any
All
last
right.
words?
Yeah. Just no, good night, Doc.
He likes to say that. Remember, our motto here is silence is betrayal. So I want you guys to remember, until next time, you stay informed, you stay compassionate, you keep seeking the truth, you keep demanding justice, never stop speaking up. And the criminals never stop, so neither are we. So until next time, keep fighting, and we'll see you on Thursday night. Or no, yeah, this
Yep.
is Sunday. I got confused. We'll see you Thursday night. Ciao, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Most of them will never be on the news. Most of them will never hear their name. They sit across from someone terrified, and they learn to play a quiet waiting game. They build their trust in the wreckage of everything that someone cannot say. It is not the badge that keeps them going. It is not the rank or the uniform they wear. It is something deeper, something older, something most people do not even know is there. Bigger than the badge, bigger than the oath they swore, bigger than the uniform, bigger than the law. It is a promise made to someone they had never even met, a promise they were keeping before the sun had even set. Bigger than the badge, bigger than them all. They learn the language of the broken so they can speak it gently back. They sit with people drowning in their silence, and they pull them from the black. They go home to their families carrying what they cannot say out loud. They lay it down beside them in the darkness, but it never really lets them go. It is not the badge that keeps them going. It is not the rank or the uniform they wear. It is something deep, bigger than them all. Some nights the case goes cold, some nights the trail goes dry. Some nights they sit alone in parking lots and quietly ask themselves why. But then they think about the ones they found, the ones who made it through, and they pick up every single file and they start again for you. It is not the badge that keeps them going, it is not the rank or the uniform they wear. It is something deeper, something older, something most people do not even know is there. Bigger than the badge, bigger than the oath they swore, bigger than the uniform, bigger than the law. It is a promise made to someone they had never even met, a promise they were keeping before the sun had even set. Bigger than the badge, bigger than them all. Before they ever knew your face, they were preparing for you. Before anyone sounded the alarm, they were sharpening every skill. They were forged for this moment and every promise they ever made. So if tonight feels like forever and the dark feels like it owns you, somebody already made a promise that reaches all the way to you. They raised a hand before they knew you, and everything they carry now, they carry for you most of all. And for the ones they could not bring back home, they carry every name and every face, and know that somebody still carries you. Somebody still carries you. You were never left behind. Bigger than the badge, bigger than the badge, bigger than the oath they swore, bigger than the uniform, bigger than the law. It is a promise made to someone they had never even met, a promise they were keeping before the sun had even set. Bigger than the badge, bigger than them all, bigger than the badge, bigger than